He was charming, he was intelligent, and he was deadly. Ted Bundy didn't just kill his victims. He tricked them into walking straight into his hands. His greatest weapon wasn't a knife or a gun. It was his ability to manipulate the human mind. Today, we explore the psychology behind how Ted Bundy deceived the people around him and why no one suspected the monster hiding behind the smile. Ted Bundy is remembered as one of America's most notorious serial killers. During the 1970s, he confessed over 30 murders, though experts believe the real number was much higher. But Bundy's crimes weren't committed in the shadows of dark alleys. They happened in broad daylight, on college campuses, in crowded neighborhoods. What made Bundy terrifying wasn't just the brutality of his acts. It was the ease with which he gained his victims' trust. Bundy understood something most killers never did. Appearances mattered. He dressed neatly, spoke confidently, and lived like an ordinary young man. A law student, a political volunteer, a neighbor you wouldn't think twice about. Psychologists call this the mask of sanity. Bundy wore it perfectly, convincing people he was safe, while hiding the truth that he was hunting them. His most infamous trick was simple. He pretended to be weak. Bundy often faked injuries, wearing a cast or hobbling on crutches. He'd drop books, ask for help with his car, or struggle to lift something heavy. Most people felt sympathy. They saw a young man in need and stepped forward. And that's when Bundy struck. It wasn't brute force that lured his victims. It was kindness weaponized against them. And when sympathy was enough, Bundy relied on charm. He was witty, intelligent, and could make strangers feel like friends in minutes. This psychological manipulation, known as impression management, allowed him to lower defenses almost instantly. By the time victims felt uneasy, it was already too late. To understand Bundy, experts turned to psychology. He displayed classic traits of a psychopath. No empathy, no guilt, shallow emotions, a constant need for control. To Bundy, people weren't human beings. They were opportunities, objects, targets, and every interaction was a game, one he was determined to win. Ted Bundy's tactics left investigators baffled and the public terrified. But what's even more disturbing is how he learned to perfect his techniques. Because Bundy didn't just wake up one day as a killer. He practiced, he studied, he experimented on people long before his crimes escalated. Ted Bundy wasn't just a killer. He was a manipulator, someone who could bend human psychology to his will. In part 1, we uncovered how he tricked his victims with charm, vulnerability, and deception. But what most people don't realize is that Bundy didn't perfect these tactics overnight. Before he became a murderer, he was already testing the limits of his manipulation, and the signs were there, hiding in plain sight. Bundy's first tricks weren't deadly. They were subtle, small experiments to see how easily people could be fooled. Friends recalled how Bundy lied effortlessly, creating stories out of thin air, stories so convincing, people rarely questioned him. He stole, he cheated, and when caught, he smiled his way out of trouble. Every successful lie was practice. Every excuse was a rehearsal for what was to come. Bundy's most dangerous talent wasn't what he said. It was what he noticed. He studied people, how they reacted, who looked nervous when he smiled, who leaned in when he asked for help, who backed away when he raised his voice. By observing, Bundy learned which personalities were easier to manipulate and which ones weren't worth the effort. Psychologists call this predatory scanning, the ability to spot vulnerability the way a hunter spots prey. Bundy tested these skills on those closest to him. Friends, girlfriends, even strangers he'd never meet again. He pushed boundaries, sometimes emotionally, sometimes physically. If someone resisted, he'd retreat with charm. If they complied, he remembered exactly what worked. Each encounter was a step towards something darker. Each success gave him the confidence to push further. By the time Bundy began luring women with fake casts and broken down cars, he already knew how most people would respond. He had studied kindness, he had practiced charm, and he had learned how to make people ignore their instincts. To the world, Bundy was a normal young man, but in his own mind, he was building a skill set, one that would soon become his most lethal weapon. Bundy's early manipulations prepared him for what came next. But what truly set him apart wasn't just his practice. It was his ability to blend in with society while carrying out his darkest crimes. Because as investigators would later discover, Bundy wasn't hiding in shadows. He was shaking hands with politicians, volunteering on campaigns, even studying the very laws that might one day be used against him. Ted Bundy was more than a killer. He was a performer. In Part 2, we revealed how he practiced manipulation long before his murders began. But Bundy's greatest deception wasn't how he lured his victims. It was how he convinced the entire world he was someone else entirely, a man you could trust, a man you'd never suspect. This was Bundy's double life. By day, Ted Bundy was a picture of success. He studied psychology. He worked on political campaigns. He even volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline, calmly talking strangers out of taking their own lives. He appeared compassionate, thoughtful, reliable. To those who knew him, Bundy wasn't a monster. He was the friend you'd call in the middle of the night, the student you'd trust with your secrets, the man you'd never imagined capable of violence. Bundy understood the power of blending in. He could mirror the behavior of anyone he spoke to, adjusting his tone, his body language, even his humor to match theirs. Psychologists call this social mimicry, and Bundy used it like a weapon. If you were shy, he was gentle. If you were confident, he was charming. Whoever you wanted him to be, that's who Bundy became. And that's why so many people trusted him instantly. But behind this mask, Bundy was living a second life. At night, he prowled college campuses and neighborhoods. He drove around looking for opportunities, places where he could test the tricks he perfected. He carried props, fake casts, crutches, even a police badge to impersonate authority. By day, he was a respected young man with ambition. By night, he was calculating his next move, and no one suspected a thing. Bundy's double life worked because it fed into a dangerous assumption that killers looked dangerous. People expected criminals to be outsiders, disheveled, unstable, visibly threatening. Bundy was none of those things. He was handsome, intelligent, well-spoken. He looked safe. That illusion became his camouflage, and it's why Bundy was able to continue his crimes for so long. But here's the chilling part. Bundy's double life didn't just allow him to keep killing. It also gave him access to something far more terrifying. Because while he studied law, volunteered in politics, and worked on crisis hotlines, Bundy was also learning how the system worked. Bundy's interest in the law wasn't an accident. He enrolled in law school not only to build a respectable image, but to understand the very rules he would one day manipulate. He studied court procedures, learning how evidence was gathered and how witnesses could be challenged. To Bundy, the law wasn't protection. It was a playbook. When Bundy first came under suspicion, he didn't panic. He prepared. During questioning, he remained calm, respectful, even helpful. He spoke like a man who had nothing to hide, often confusing detectives with his composure. Psychologists call this cognitive empathy, the ability to understand how others think, without actually feeling what they feel. Bundy didn't share emotions with his interrogators, but he predicted them. He knew what they wanted to hear, and he gave it to them. While other suspects crumbled under pressure, Bundy leaned into his charm. He joked with officers. He flattered reporters. He even convinced some people that he was being framed, that a bright young law student could never be guilty of such crimes. It was manipulation at its finest, the same skills he used on his victims. Bundy now turned against the justice system itself. Every delay worked in Bundy's favor. Every moment he wasn't behind bars was another opportunity. He filed motions. He studied case law, and he watched carefully, noting every mistake investigators made. Bundy understood that the legal system was slow. He knew how to use that slowness as cover, staying one step ahead while bodies continued to surface. But Bundy's brilliance came with arrogance. He believed he was smarter than everyone else, and that overconfidence would soon lead him into a moment he couldn't charm his way out of. Because, while Bundy was busy outsmarting the system, a single traffic stop was about to expose the dark secrets hidden inside his car. In Part 4, We revealed how Ted Bundy used his intelligence and knowledge of the law to stay one step ahead of investigators. But even the most careful predator makes mistakes. And for Bundy, that mistake came in the form of a routine traffic stop. What police discovered inside his car would shatter his mask of innocence and reveal the first glimpse of the monster he truly was. It was 1975. Bundy was driving late at night through Utah, cruising the empty roads his tan Volkswagen Beetle. To anyone else, it looked like an ordinary car. But to Bundy, it was his hunting ground, a mobile trap designed for luring victims. When a police officer noticed Bundy driving suspiciously, weaving slightly and speeding up, he decided to pull him over. It was routine, nothing unusual. At least, that's what the officer thought. When the officer approached Bundy, the young law student was calm, polite, and cooperative. Nothing about him screamed danger. But the officer's instincts told him something was off, so he searched the car. What he found was chilling. A ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, rope, an ice pick, tools that weren't just suspicious. They were terrifying. It wasn't burglary equipment. It was a kit designed for control, abduction, and violence. Bundy was arrested on suspicion of burglary, but investigators quickly realized they might be dealing with something far worse. The discovery didn't prove murder, not yet, but it painted a disturbing picture. But Bundy wasn't about to let the walls close in. Why would a promising law student carry a murder kit in his car? At first, Bundy brushed it off. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that the items were harmless, that he used them for skiing, camping, or odd jobs. Some people even believed him. That was Bundy's gift, twisting logic until doubt set in. But doubt wouldn't protect him forever. As police dug deeper, they noticed a disturbing connection. Women had been disappearing in states where Bundy just happened to be living. Descriptions of a man with a Volkswagen matched Bundy's car. Witnesses recalled a charming young man with a cast, asking for help. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit. For the first time, Bundy's name was whispered alongside the word murder. Bundy was no longer invisible. The mask had cracked, and while investigators didn't yet have enough to convict him of murder, they had a dangerous man in custody. Because in the courtroom, Ted Bundy had one last advantage: the ability to play the role of his life. He turned the courtroom into a stage, and ends with another suspenseful hook. Most accused criminals sit quietly in court, relying on their lawyers to do the talking. Not Ted Bundy. Bundy fired his legal team and insisted on representing himself. It wasn't about trust. It was about control. He didn't want someone else telling his story. He wanted to be the story. Bundy walked into court clean-cut and confident, flashing smiles to reporters and waving to spectators. To some, he looked more like a young politician than an accused killer. The media couldn't resist. Bundy's face was everywhere, on TV and newspapers, splashed across headlines. And Bundy loved it. He wasn't just on trial. He was on stage. During hearings, Bundy cross-examined witnesses with practiced confidence. He made objections, cited laws, and performed like a seasoned attorney. Jurors were stunned. Some even admired him. They wondered, could someone this intelligent, this composed, really be guilty of such horrors? That was Bundy's plan. To blur the line between monster and man. To confuse, to charm, to create doubt. But beneath the showmanship, something darker was happening. Bundy's obsession with representing himself revealed his true nature. He wasn't interested in justice. He wasn't even interested in freedom. He wanted power. Over the court, over the media, over everyone watching. Every question, every smile, every headline, all fed Bundy's ego. It wasn't enough to kill in secret. Now, he wanted to manipulate in public. But while Bundy was busy acting in the courtroom, he was also planning something far more dangerous. Because in his mind, the trial wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And soon, Ted Bundy would prove that he wasn't just capable of outsmarting a jury. He was capable of outsmarting the prison walls themselves. June 1977. Bundy was being transported to a courthouse in Colorado for a pretrial hearing. Unlike most prisoners, Bundy wasn't shackled. He convinced guards to allow him access to the law library. arguing that, as his own attorney, he needed resources to prepare his defense. The guards agreed. They underestimated him. While left alone, Bundy opened a second-story window, paused for just a moment, and jumped. He hit the ground hard, spraining his ankle, but he kept running. For 6 days, Bundy vanished into the Colorado wilderness. 6 days that left authorities humiliated and the public terrified. But eventually, Bundy was caught and brought back. Only this time, they swore he'd never escape again. They were wrong. December 1977, just 6 months after his first escape, Bundy tried again. But this time, his plan was far more calculated. Inside his jail cell, Bundy had been quietly preparing. He lost weight, dropping more than 30 pounds. He studied the building, and he discovered a small hole in the ceiling above his bed. Bit by bit, Bundy widened the hole until it was just big enough for his slimmed-down frame. Then one night, while guards were distracted, Bundy slipped through the ceiling and crawled into the jail's crawl space. From there, he broke into the apartment of a jail employee, changed clothes, and simply walked out the front door. No alarms, no chase, just gone. This time, Bundy wasn't missing for days. He was missing for weeks. He stole cars. He used fake IDs. And he traveled across the country, vanishing into the cracks of 1970s America. Every day he was free, the danger grew, because Bundy wasn't content with running. He was ready to kill again. For the police, Bundy's escape was a nightmare. For Bundy, it was an opportunity. And just weeks later, he would unleash one of the most brutal attacks of his entire life. An attack that shocked the nation and left a trail of devastation in Florida. In Part 7, we watched Ted Bundy do the impossible, escaping custody not once, but twice. His second escape left him free for weeks. And during that time, Bundy wasn't just hiding, he was hunting. What came next would be one of the most horrific chapters in American crime history. After slipping out of jail in Colorado, Bundy headed south. He stole cars, used fake IDs, and slept in cheap motels under false names. For weeks, he drifted across states, blending into crowds and disappearing into background. But running wasn't enough. Bundy craved control, and control for him meant killing. By January 1978, Bundy had made his way to Tallahassee, Florida. He rented a room near Florida State University, blending in with the bustling college town. To his neighbors, he seemed like just another student trying to get by. Quiet, polite, unremarkable, but inside, Bundy was restless. The urge to kill was building again, stronger than ever. On the night of January 15th, 1978, Bundy slipped into the Chi Omega sorority house just after 2:30 a.m. What happened inside was a frenzy of violence. Bundy brutally attacked 4 women in their sleep. 2 of them would never wake up. 2 others barely survived, left with devastating injuries. The brutality of the attack shocked even seasoned investigators. This wasn't Bundy the manipulator, the charming trickster. This was Bundy fully unleashed. A predator no longer hiding behind a mask. The Chi Omega murder sent shockwaves through Florida and the nation. Police scrambled to find the killer. But Bundy didn't stop there. In the following weeks, he continued his spree, abducting and murdering again before anyone could piece together the trail. Every day, the fear grew. College students locked their doors. Communities held their breath. And still, Bundy prowled in the shadows. But Bundy's freedom wouldn't last forever, because just weeks after the Chi Omega massacre, a routine traffic stop would once again bring him face to face with police. And this time, investigators would begin to connect the dots, revealing just how far his killing spree had spread. In Part 8, Ted Bundy's reign of terror reached a horrifying peak with the Chi Omega sorority house murders in Florida. The killings were brutal, senseless, and public, and yet Bundy continued to roam free, until one ordinary traffic stop would bring everything crashing down. After the Chi Omega attack, Bundy was restless and reckless. He was broke, stealing cars and money just to survive. Every move put him at greater risk. But Bundy's arrogance made him careless. On February 15, 1978, a police officer in Pensacola, Florida, noticed a suspicious car. It had been stolen. The officer pulled it over. Behind the wheel sat Ted Bundy. When the officer approached, Bundy tried to talk his way out of it. But this time, charm wasn't enough. He fought. He struggled. But he was no match. Bundy was dragged out of the car and pinned to the ground. The arresting officer later recalled Bundy pleading, "I wish you had just killed me." The predator who once believed he was untouchable was finally in handcuffs. At first, Bundy gave a fake name. He stalled, lied, and tried to confuse investigators. But his identity couldn't stay hidden for long. When police ran his fingerprints, the truth was revealed. They weren't just holding a car thief. They had one of America's most wanted men. And soon, evidence began to pile up. Witnesses placed Bundy near crime scenes. Victims had described a man with his face, his car, his voice, and forensic evidence linked him to the Chi Omega murders. The mask was gone. Bundy's arrest made headlines across the country. The charming law student, the intelligent manipulator, the supposed nice guy, now exposed as a killer. But for Bundy, this wasn't the end. It was just another stage. Because once again, he would turn the courtroom into his playground, and the trial would make him a household name. Ted Bundy's final arrest ended his spree of terror, but it also set the stage for one of the most infamous trials in American history. Television cameras would capture every moment. The nation would watch as Bundy defended himself, and the world would finally see how far his obsession with control would go. In Part 9, Ted Bundy's freedom came to a crashing halt with his arrest in Florida. Fingerprints, witnesses, and mounting evidence exposed him as a man behind a string of brutal murders. But even in custody, Bundy wasn't finished. Because now he had a new audience, and he would put on his most disturbing performance yet. It was 1979. For the first time in U.S. history, a criminal trial will be broadcast live on national television. Millions of Americans tuned in to see the man accused of savagely murdering women at Florida State University. Ted Bundy wasn't just another defendant. He was a star, and he played the role with chilling confidence. He smirked at the cameras. He winked at reporters. He charmed young women who showed up to watch. For Bundy, the trial wasn't about life or death. It was about attention. Against all advice, Bundy chose to represent himself. He questioned witnesses. He challenged the prosecution. He strutted around the courtroom as though he were the smartest man in the room. But behind the theatrics, the evidence was damning. Survivors described him. Witnesses placed him at the crime scene. And forensic evidence, including bite marks on one victim, matched his teeth with chilling precision. No amount of charm could erase that. The trial became a media sensation. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. Crowds lined up for seats in the gallery. And disturbingly, young women flocked to see Bundy, some even believing in his innocence, others drawn to his dark charisma. It was as though Bundy had become a celebrity, but his fame was built on blood. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 7 hours. The verdict, guilty. Bundy was convicted of the Chi Omega murders. The judge sentenced him to death, calling his crimes extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. The words would haunt Bundy's legacy forever. For most men, a death sentence would be the end. But Ted Bundy wasn't done. Because even as he sat on death row, Bundy began to plot again. Not another escape, but another game. One where the stakes were higher than ever. And this time, the prize wasn't freedom. It was survival. Locked away in Florida State Prison, Bundy's future seemed sealed. But he refused to accept the end. For years, Bundy fought his sentence with endless appeals. He filed motions. He argued technicalities. And with every delay, he bought himself more time. Time to stay alive. Time to stay relevant. Time to stay in control. Bundy discovered a new weapon, information. He began confessing, not all at once, but in fragments. A detail here, a location there. Each revelation dangled like bait before investigators desperate to close cold cases. Bundy knew the truth. As long as he held secrets, he held power. Families of missing women waited in agony. Investigators wrestled with frustration. And Bundy, even in a cage, pulled their strings. Death Row only amplified Bundy's notoriety. He gave interviews, at times denying everything, at times admitting more than anyone could bear. Each confession blurred the line between truth and manipulation. Was he finally being honest, or was it just another performance? A desperate attempt to rewrite his legacy? By the late 1980s, Bundy's final appeals were running out. The clock was ticking. And suddenly, Bundy grew more cooperative. He began offering confessions to law enforcement across multiple states, but always with conditions. He wanted delays. He wanted control. And until the very end, he seemed to believe he could cheat death one last time. But the clock doesn't stop for anyone, not even Ted Bundy. Because in January of 1989, the state of Florida set his final execution date. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, Bundy seemed to realize he was truly out of moves. In Part 11, we saw Ted Bundy on death row, using confessions as bargaining chips, play investigators, and delaying the inevitable. But in 1989, time finally ran out, and for the first time in his life, Bundy faced something he couldn't manipulate, charm, or escape. The end. January 24th, 1989, Florida State Prison. In his last days, Bundy gave a series of interviews. His once confident demeanor was cracked, the smirk replaced by nervousness, his voice slower, more desperate. He admitted to murders across multiple states, dozens of them, but the truth remained slippery. He never gave investigators everything. Even in his final hours, Bundy clung to control by holding back secrets. In chilling detail, Bundy described how he stalked, tricked, and overpowered his victims. He confessed to crimes long suspected but never proven. Yet, as he spoke, it was clear Bundy wasn't confessing out of guilt. He was confessing because he had nothing left to bargain with. Words were his last attempt to shape the story, to remain the center of attention until the very end. Outside the prison, crowds gathered, reporters, protesters, and even those cheering for his death. Signs read, "Burn Bundy, burn." Inside, guards prepared the electric chair nicknamed Old Sparky. Bundy was led to his final seat, strapped down by his arms and legs. For a man who had controlled so many lives, this was the first time he was powerless. At 7:16 a.m., the switch was thrown. A surge of electricity coursed through Ted Bundy. Witnesses described the smell of burning flesh, the body convulsing against restraints. And just like that, it was over. The most infamous killer of his generation was dead. Outside, the crowd erupted, not in sorrow, but in celebration. The monster was gone, but the scars he left would never heal. Ted Bundy's story ended in the electric chair, but the questions he raised still linger. How could someone so ordinary hide something so monstrous? How many victims remain unknown? And perhaps most chilling of all, could another Bundy already be out there, hiding in plain sight? Because Bundy's true legacy isn't just a horror of his crimes. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes, it looks like the boy next door.